Donkey Kong Country Returns is one of the most brilliant platforming games I have ever played in my entire life. Released in 2010 for the Nintendo Wii, this game would serve as the resurrection of the Donkey Kong Country series that was started back in the 90s. Creating a follow-up to one of the most beloved titles on the Super Nintendo must have been quite the demanding challenge, as Donkey Kong Country Returns could have easily ended up tarnishing the series and turning away millions of returning fans if it was executed poorly. Suffice to say, this was fortunately not the case. In fact, quite the opposite, as this game ended up being one of the greatest Wii titles, much like its Super Nintendo predecessors. This is truly a fascinating experience, so let's dive right in. Donkey Kong Country Returns consists of 8 main worlds, all of which reside on Kong Island. I've always loved the opening here, as we're forced to break through this hut before we can start playing, which does a great job at making you feel Donkey Kong's strength. The first level here is perfect. It gets across everything it needs you to know by seamlessly pushing you forward through visual cues rather than telling you with a basic text bubble. Most of Donkey Kong's moveset has returned from the classic games, but it feels much more fluent due to the improved controls. Now, I've seen a lot of hate thrown at this game due to the fact that in order to perform moves such as the roll and ground pound, you must use motion controls. However, this never really bothered me. I mean, all you're doing is shaking your wrist a little bit, and besides, if you don't like this version, you can play it on the 3DS, which includes the option for button controls rather than the motion-controlled movement of the Wii. One of the best additions to this game is Diddy Kong and his jetpack. Whenever you pick up a barrel containing him inside, he joins you by not only doubling your health, but adding a small hover ability in the form of his jetpack. This was a great inclusion because it simultaneously adds a handicap, but also a brilliant risk-reward system where upon fully understanding how to use this jetpack, you can start attempting risky maneuvers which can fail miserably if you aren't properly acquainted with it. For beginning players, Diddy Kong acts as a great way to save himself from any damage. Meanwhile, if you're an experienced player, it acts as a way to complete levels in a faster, flashier way, which can be immensely satisfying. The movement perfectly fits within the world it's implemented in, which obviously enhances the experience tenfold. As for the levels themselves, these are some of the most exhilarating, difficult, and enjoyable stages in any 2D Nintendo platform. This, along with Tropical Freeze, includes some of the most brilliant gimmicks, and literally every single level introduces something brand new, which keeps the experience fresh and unpredictable throughout its entirety. One moment you'll be riding around on a minecart through unique environments, and the next you'll be blasting through a stage on a rocket barrel. The coolest part about each world is that they all have a very distinct theme, which integrates perfectly into the levels themselves. For example, in the cave world, every level finds a new way to involve the moles and crystals into them, along with other cave-like creatures such as the bats. The beach is one of my favorites as the levels here are all very memorable simply due to how unique each one is. In my opinion, one of the best levels in the game is Tidal Terror. Here you must find cover from these large waves which take you out instantly if you're even slightly touched by it. On top of this, you also need to deal with the enemies blocking the path, and if you aren't careful, you might certainly find yourself taken out because you end up getting distracted by one of the crabs or whatnot. My other favorites in the game are the silhouette themed stages. Not only are these a highlight in the graphical department, as these are truly stunning to look at, but from a gameplay perspective, these are extremely enjoyable and by far the most unique levels on display here. As far as graphics go, this game is definitely one of the best looking games on the Wii, kinda like how the original games were some of the best looking on the Super Nintendo. But unfortunately, due to this being a Wii title, it only runs in 480p, as that was a maximum output resolution for the system. Therefore, we aren't really able to see the full potential this game could have had if it was in HD, but honestly that hardly mattered to me, as even with these limitations, the developers still found ways to make the game stand out heavily from the other titles on the console. This and Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 are some of the best looking on the Wii in my opinion. One thing the Wii doesn't struggle with is its capability to produce gorgeous music for its games, and Donkey Kong Country Returns is no exception. In fact, I would go as far as to say this game has one of the greatest soundtracks out of any title on the Wii, with the exception of the Galaxy games of course. I absolutely love the jazzy rendition of the main theme played in the silhouette levels, and the factory world is one of the most memorable in the game simply because of its music alone. This place seriously has some of the greatest music I've ever heard in a 2D platformer, and every time I replay this game, I'm eager to reach this world because of its stunning music and sound design. Another genius stage is Music Madness. In this level, you need to make your way through all sorts of different instruments that are perfectly in sync to the music, which adds a challenge seen nowhere else in the game. The fact that I'm able to remember these levels even after waiting years on end to play this game, again really speaks volumes for the brilliance that Donkey Kong Country Returns exudes. Around every single corner there is something entirely new for you to sink your teeth into and enjoy thoroughly. Along with the levels being super unique and creative, so are the enemies, and just like the levels, each world introduces a brand new enemy which is based entirely off of the environment you're currently in. The beach has an abundance of different crabs, the forest has a ton of unique plant enemies and spiders, the cliff has dinosaurs and other prehistoric life, the factory is full of robots and robotic chickens running around everywhere. The designs for these enemies are incredible, and each one stands out from one another in such a way where you'll likely never forget how any of these look or act. Their difficulty is also perfect, in fact. This game's difficulty on a whole is executed flawlessly as it starts out easy enough, but before you can even blink the difficulty is shot up to 10 and you'll be facing some pretty grueling challenges which could take you dozens of tries to finally get the hang of. The boss fights are also great, as the first few serve more as a way to get you fully accustomed to the controls and moves, but the rest are tough, and considering you only get a maximum of 4 hit points, these could definitely take you quite a few tries, especially the later ones. I love how the game requires you to go about defeating each boss, as it almost always involves a central mechanic such as rolling or climbing on vines. Regardless of the requirement to come out on top, 2 things you must have is patience and focus, as one look away from the screen could easily spell the end for you. A prime example of this would be in the final stage of the game. In order to reach the boss, you must carefully navigate your rocket barrel through all sorts of different obstacles. This is very tough and requires your utmost attention, but that's just the beginning. After this, you fight the final boss and his tactics are just crazy. Each of his attacks require great reflexes to get through, otherwise you'll no doubt get turned into ground beef from his giant hands. Nintendo did a great job with the boss fights, and I'm honestly not surprised considering how great they are at creating innovative platformers. It's definitely their biggest strong suit. Donkey Kong Country Returns is also a shining example of having that classic Nintendo charm. The cutscenes here are animated brilliantly and add so much character to not only Donkey and Diddy Kong, but to the rest of the enemies and characters as well. I love the boss fight introductions as they all perfectly capture the essence of whatever creature you're about to fight, but my favorite cutscene in the game is definitely the last one shown to the player. After defeating the last boss in the game, Donkey Kong decides it would be a great idea to punch the moon and let it fall onto the island. Suffice to say, this works successfully for him somehow, but the absurdity of it makes me laugh a little every time I see it. Overall, Donkey Kong Country Returns is the sheer definition of good old Nintendo platforming. It includes everything it possibly can in order to truly wow the player and deliver an experience on par with, if not even better than the classic titles released for the Super Nintendo all those years back. From brilliant gameplay to gorgeous melodies to lovable characters, Country Returns is by far one of the best 2D platformers on the market, and if you have not yet played this title, I strongly suggest that you do, as you don't truly know what you're missing out on unless you play it for yourself. Thank you all so much for watching, and I look forward to meeting you in the next one.